It's just common knowledge really that every new sewer looks at these little triangles on a pattern and just thinks, what are they for? And then as you get a little bit better and a little bit better at sewing, you then start to think, my goodness, is there not a better way than cutting out all these little triangles to mark notches? Well, yes. So in this video, let's talk all about these crazy little triangle notches, how important they are, and I want to give you 3 different methods you can actually use to mark the notches, depending on where you are in your skill level from beginner to advanced notches marking. My sewing friends, welcome back. I know this video is something that somebody at every skill level, there is something here for. So I started sewing when I was about 14 and I went to fashion college and so forth. But I remember there was probably 3 different light bulb moments I had around notches that made a huge big difference in my sewing journey. The first one was, the most obvious, is how important they actually are, what they're used for, and you really don't want to skip them. So when you do them all the time, how easy sewing actually becomes when you put all these notches down here. The second one was the method of marking, because you soon realize that making these tiny little triangles is a nightmare, and having a different method of actually marking the notches was groundbreaking, and I didn't have to do these triangles anymore. And the third one was when I realized that I could make my own places for notches, my own notches on the pattern, the ones that I wanted, that I knew was going to be there. Well, we won't be talking about that specifically today. The first 2 we will be. So let me start with sort of talking about what notches are, why they're important, why they're there, just in case for those who don't quite have it wrapped around in their brain yet what these little triangles are for. And then I want to give you the 3 different ways that you can actually mark in notches, depending where you are in your skill level, in your sewing journey, as it becomes easier and easier for you to see these little things. And one bonus tip for you at the end. Okay, so just what are notches? So notches are generally indicated by these little triangles on the pattern. They either poke outwards or they poke inwards on a pattern. So this is not to be confused with other markings like circles and dots and squares. They are all pattern markings that need to be transferred. We're talking specifically about the notches that are the triangles that you find on a pattern. So these are here to actually help you sew the pattern pieces together. So let's for a minute pretend that these are fabric and not just paper. But as you have your cut garments together and you're ready to start pinning them together and sewing pattern pieces together, when you start getting patterns that are, say, really long like this, they're actually to indicate where each of these 2 layers need to meet together to actually sew them together. So it helps you to pin and ease in seams properly and know where things fit. For instance, over bust seams, princess seams, one pattern piece is curved and the other is not. If you don't have your notches there, there is absolutely 0 chance that you're going to sew that seam together and ease it in right to get the right shape. We've all tried, failed. So notches are there to really help you actually sew better, because they tell you which points are supposed to match up so you don't have to guess, and it's really evident on those really long pieces or where you've got bits of eased in and gathers and things like that. And so they are so important because when you do all of these things, it makes the actual sewing really easy. So it's really important to do them. The first method to actually trace, copy, transfer these notches to your pattern is to use the triangles method. And this is what it sort of shows you on the pattern to do. And basically this is what you do when you're starting to learn to sew, because 1, you want them to be super obvious so that you see them, and 2, you actually want it to match up and look like it does on the instruction sheets, because it makes it a lot easier for you to see where all of the things are and make sure you have the right pattern piece in front of you. And so that means that you literally just cut out the little triangles out of the fabric, just like it shows you on the pattern envelope. It's very easy and it is the fail-safe method, but it doesn't take you very long to realize that it is such a pain to have to cut out all these tiny little triangles. And if you're like me, you always forget. So I used to, when I used to do one-on-one teaching with people, when we could actually see people, I would we'd lay out fabric and be showing them, going through a project with them, and they'd be cutting down this end, and I'd obviously help cut from this end, and so we could speed up the process and get through more in a class. I would always cut off the little triangles, always. And then I'd say, that's okay. You know what? I have a better way to show you. And that is what leads us into now. So this is what I'm going to call a level 2. The triangles are a pain. So what I suggest that you do as a bit of an easier flow through is to use a marker or a pen or chalk and actually mark in your notches. So I recommend that you actually cut out the triangle the opposite direction, so the triangle comes out of the pattern, so it's really obvious, and that means that you can actually mark where the notch is, exactly where the notches are, and it's not as hard to miss, and mark all those in. You obviously need to mark in both sides, so you have to flip it over to do both sides, but chalk is still really visible. Use a color that's quite visible. Use the little marker pens, and they're even more visible, so they're really easy to see and you don't miss them, and it's a little bit easier to kind of cut out your pattern and then go ahead and mark everything with your pen or chalk afterwards. Now, level 3 notches. This is more of an industry practice, and this is where I learnt this method, and it's simply to do a little nick in the side. So you'll cut out the pattern, cut out the triangle from the pattern like I showed you, so actually notch it out of the pattern so you've got that space there, so you know that visual cue to actually do the notches when you come across them. But then all you have to do is just simply do a little nick inside the pattern, and that's your notch. So by a nick, I mean a tiny, tiny little cut straight. It must be straight, parallel in, not on an angle anywhere, straight in, and no more than halfway through your seam allowance. It needs to be very, very small. If you do it too big, it will just cause you problems, obviously, for obvious reasons, I think. So it must be no more than halfway, a tiny little nick. And basically that's your notch. So you only really do this when you're quite advanced and you just sort of know where the notches should be on a pattern, and you'll naturally go looking for them, and you'll find them, of course, because that's what you're looking for and you know where to look for them. It's very, obviously this is not a good suggestion for a beginner, or if you're still struggling to put things together, because it's very unobvious where all the notches are, so you need to sort of know where they are. But it's a really, really quick process because you can quickly cut out your pattern. All you do is nick, 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 and you're done. It's super accurate, being that you cut through a nice thin, slim line, and it is on both sides of the pattern straight away, hence why it's a really fast method of notching. But what's the best method? There is no best method. It's up to you and your process. But what I suggest might be a nice compromise between all of them is actually a combination. I would suggest that perhaps once you upgrade from cutting out the tiny little triangles, and nobody wants to do that, is to actually do a tiny little nick, even smaller than a proper nick, and actually then mark over the top with your pen or texter so that it's really visual, but the cut actually gives you a really accurate thin line on the other side, and when you're sewing you can see it, and then of course it kind of trains you to know where they are. So as you go further and further in your sewing journey, you'll probably find that you need to mark over the top less and less because you're just naturally looking for those little nicks. I told you it was a little bit of a journey. So I think it's fun that as you get different skills and you go along, that you can progress the same things. Simple things like notches can become different, and it looks different the way that you do it as you go along in your sewing journey. Now, I did mention a bonus tip, didn't I? Yes, I did. A lot of people, I think, get confused when you see those double notches and single notches. So just in case you didn't know, the double notches usually always indicate the back pattern piece, and the single notches usually are to indicate a front piece. So that's how you, they're always on, say, armholes, for example. That's how you know which is the front and which is the back. Or a pant crotch seam, double notches is the back, single notches are the front. That's how you know whether you've got the wrong pieces together or the right pieces. So my friends, which one of these notching methods do you use, or will you try now that with new notching information? Leave those comments below. I do really enjoy reading them. And if you did enjoy this video, like it if you liked it, and consider sharing it with someone that you know that would enjoy it also. It really helps my content get out there and helps support me and this channel and spread the sewing love. Okay, well, until next time, happy sewing. Bye.